Problem number 7. It is incumbent on a common man to follow the most learned jurist insofar as the obligation to follow the most learned jurist is concerned. So if the most learned jurist gives a verdict for the obligation of his taqlid, it would not be permissible for the common man to follow other jurists in matters of secondary importance. In case, however, the most learned jurist gives verdict in favor of permissibility of following a jurist other than the most learned, then the common man would be at liberty to make a choice between his taqlid and that of the other. It would, however, not be permissible for a common man to follow a jurist other than the most learned in case the jurist other than the most learned gives a verdict in favor of non-obligation of the taqlid of the most learned jurist. Of course, if a jurist other than the most learned gives a verdict in favor of the obligation of taqlid of the most learned, it would be permissible to act upon his opinion, but not as its being a final authority, but rather his opinion being in conformity with caution. Problem number 8. In case there are two mujtahids of equal learning, the common man would be at liberty to refer to either of them for guidance, as also it would be permissible for him to follow one of them in some cases and follow another in other cases. Problem number 9. It is obligatory for a common man to act with due caution during his search for the mujtahid or an alim, the most learned jurist. In the second case, i.e., the search for an alim, it is sufficient to exercise caution while acting on the verdict of those in whose case there is likelihood of their being alim, and that he should accept their most cautious statements. Problem number 10. It is permissible to act upon the verdict of a non-alim madful, one who is excelled by another, in matters where his verdict agrees with that of the alim, but also in matters where he is not aware of any difference between the verdicts of the two. Problem number 11. If, in a matter, there is no verdict of an alim, it would be permissible to refer that matter to a mujtahid other than the alim. However, observing the order of succession from the more learned to less learned. Problem number 12. If a person follows someone who is not competent to issue a verdict, and later comes to realize the fact, it would be obligatory on him to revert to someone who is competent. Similarly, if a person follows a non-alim, as a precaution, it would be obligatory on him to revert to the alim, as a precaution. The same would be the rule if a person follows an alim and, later, someone else turns out to be more learned than that alim, as regards matters in which the person has knowledge in detail of their disagreement in both cases. Problem number 13. It is not permissible to follow initially a deceased alim. Of course, it is permissible to continue his taqlid in some matters absolutely on which he has acted upon during his lifetime, and apparently even in matters on which he has not acted upon during his lifetime, as a precaution. However, it is permissible to revert to a living alim, and this reversion is in conformity with the most cautious opinion. As a precaution, it is not permissible subsequently to revert to the verdict of the deceased alim. Similarly, it is not permissible to revert to another living jurist, except when the latter is more learned than the former, because, according to the more cautious opinion, it is obligatory to shift over to the more learned mujtahid. It is more reliable for a person to continue to follow a living alim rather than to follow a deceased alim. If a person continues to follow a deceased mujtahid without shifting over to a living one, according to whose verdict it is permissible to continue to follow a deceased mujtahid. It would be as if the person is acting without taqlid.